Right, in a bit, when it's live, you'll see this CX not live will go to live. I think it'll start going live in the next minute or so.
Okay.
I don't want to be
You
going
can't
live.
swear after a minute.
No, I know, I can see. Yeah. That's all right. We're getting, I've got Nigel Barkling waiting room, but I won't, unless you want him in now, I'll leave him sat there for a while. I'm waiting for Damon, actually.
Just been talking to Damon, he's on his way.
Oh, is he? He's logging it. Is he actually coming into the room, or is he?
No, I don't think so.
explain what CX Live means on the screen?
Can you say that again? Sorry. Sorry, Chair, I missed that.
I believe you have some words to say about the comment CX Live on the screen at the moment.
Oh yes, today we are being streamed live to YouTube. So this meeting is a public meeting, Chair, just to make members of the board aware.
Thank you. And if we move on to the agenda, so it's quite a busy agenda today, a lot of information coming your way, so let's make a start. So if we first of all go to apologies of absence. Again, David, if I'd like to come to you, if you could just list who we have missing today.
Yeah, I've received apologies from Angela Stansfield, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving straight on to declarations of interest. So I'd like to ask if any of the members have any interest to declare, which are relating to today's agenda topics. If everyone's shaking head and staying muted, then I will take that as a no, and we can continue to point number 3, minutes of last meetings. So you've got a few minutes to attend to here. So I'd like to ask the board if everyone agrees that the minutes from the previous meetings are a true reflection of those meetings, dating from the 5th of June from the board meeting, and also the informal meetings held on the 26th of June, 10th of July, and 24th of July.
Thank you, Chair. I propose to move those as a true record.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm moving straight on to...
Sorry, Chair, can we just get other members to turn the cameras on so we can just get a show of hands to approve them, please?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And moving on to point 4, stage 2 consultation outcomes. I'll hand you over to Carl Apps, and Nexus, I believe, will be supporting this. Carl?
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Nexus haven't yet joined, unfortunately, but I've just spoken to them. They're on their way. So as you're aware, we carried out 2 consultation events. The first one was regarding people's perceptions of Clay Cross as it is now. So it was those people who live and work in Clay Cross, but also who go to school there or who visit for whatever reason. So that was to understand the baseline in terms of what it is that they think works well and what is it that they think potentially could be improved within Clay Cross. Those ideas were taken alongside the vision that the board had already started to work together, and to see where that sort of lies in terms of what we can do to enhance the offering within Clay Cross. And then Peter and his team started to develop the ideas based on the feedback that they'd originally had and the original vision of the board. Looked at the built environment, started to look at the evidence base as well from local plan and other such pieces of work that have been done to understand what sort of level of intervention is required within Clay Cross. The projects were identified as the board has seen and spoken about previously, and then these were taken out to be consulted to the wider group of Clay Cross. The part of the consultation was to send a postcard to every address. Now, I understand in the first consultation there was issues, not every address received those. So we tried to make sure within our second consultation that those were received. We also created questionnaires that were on the website, and there was paper copies within shops within the district where people were able to, within Clay Cross, where people were able to fill out that paper copy and then post that there. And then all that was analysed by Peter and his team. Peter, did you want to talk a bit more about the work that's happened post that? So what I've done at the minute is just explained the process for the consultation for phase 1, process for phase 2, and what was consulted upon. And you're on mute, by the way.
Apologies. Morning all, sorry for being late, technical issues. Yeah, happy to do that, Carl. Is that specifically in relation to the consultation? or more broadly in terms of the strategy overall?
Initially, talking about the consultation, so it's just to give I gave a broad outline as to how and why. If you want to add
Yeah. Well, no, not really. As Carl said, we given COVID restrictions, we sought to try and engage as many people as we could, and leaflets were distributed to all properties. Summary boards were placed in a number of shops, including Tesco's, as well as a number of shops on Market Street, and those were signposted so people were aware that there was opportunities to look at those on in hard copy, so to speak, in the shops. And obviously there was a number of social media posts through the course of the consultation, again to encourage people to respond. So obviously we've analysed the outcome of that consultation, and I'm just trying to find my copy of that. But overall, as you can see, for those that responded, and I think we would have liked more to respond, but I think my sense is, and I might be wrong here, that people felt they'd kind of already given us their to-do list, if you like, in the first stage, and that's certainly something that we have used to develop the framework. But overall, there is, for those that responded, there is strong support for the vision and for the strategy. So that should give us some confidence, and that was certainly, I don't know if Carl's mentioned as yet, but the feedback from the Towns Hub to date has been very supportive and complimentary around the consultation that's been undertaken. So that is something that we can major on in presentation of the tip.
I suppose at that point, there's if there's any questions on the consultation, now's the time to field them, I suppose.
That's open to the room. Any questions? If not, then I say thank you, and we'll move on to point 5, which is the draft tip. Again, that's back to Carl.
Okay, so Peter's going to be talking you through the draft tip in a moment, but what I'd ask you to have in mind is reading the tip. If you were to take out the name Clay Cross, do you think it would adequately describe Clay Cross as a place? So is it taking away that any town, any place type factor? So is it rooted in the place and the individual challenges that Clay Cross has? Do you think that's adequately displayed in the tip? And also, do you think the projects and the things that we've identified within the tip, do you think that resolves the issues that have been raised? And also, does it feed into the vision that you as a board have created? So once Peter's talked you through the tip, if you could have that in mind, I'm presuming you've read the tip already and you sort of understand the themes. If you can think of those things, does it answer those questions? I think that's quite important in terms of when we put the tip in, if we've ticked those boxes. So Peter, if you want to talk us through the tip.
Yes, again, I'm having technical difficulties. Can't seem to load any documents this morning. But
is it worth the tip being shared on the screen?
That would be fabulous if you could do that, Carl.
Damon, are you able to do that, or Joe? Great.
Right.
Thank you, Joe.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So this is there's two elements to the tip, to the town investment plan submission that we need to submit at the end of October. This is the first part, which is the overarching strategy, if you like, and in many ways the key document at this stage. The second part of the tip is effectively the projects, and more detail on those projects, which we are working up, and I think we are due to issue probably a draft there's another board, I think, in a couple of weeks. So we will be issuing a draft of that document ahead of that meeting. But I think, subject to the agenda, I think it'd be useful to kind of run through the projects and kind of outline where we are at the moment. But coming back to this document, if we scroll through fairly quickly, again, Carl, I don't know whether you've mentioned that this has been presented to the town's hub, the project coordinators for government. Sorry, Carl.
Sorry, no, not yet. I was going to pick that up later on.
Right.
Feedback from that.
Okay, fine. So this has been issued to the town's hub, and Carl can kind of respond on the feedback on that. So obviously we set the context. I think importantly, if you could just scroll up a page, we identify the vision, which is, as we said, we have consulted on. We then identify in headline terms the projects. So obviously Market Street, Claycross Creative, Bridge Street, the Skills Hub, Public Realm, Charley Park, and the Leisure Centre, the potential for a rail station, low carbon workspace at Coney Green, and the district heating pilot. So we present the overall strategy, and if we scroll on to the next page, we begin to kind of set Claycross in its context, and important to the town's hub and government is that we are understanding of the context, and that we are relating into wider sub-regional and regional strategies. So again, that's an important aspect of this presentation to the town's fund. So I could scroll on a little more. Obviously, that's the area that we are dealing with, which you'll be familiar with. Keep going. So again, here what we do is we identify the key issues, the key challenges that the Towns Fund project is intended to address. So a lack of vibrancy and quality in the town centre, and that's certainly something that has been picked up through consultation and remains very important to the local community. Aligned to that is image and perception, I think both within the community but also externally in terms of the investment proposition of Claycross. There's issues of poor connectivity, and I think we want to continue to kind of build on this case, but there is clearly the opportunity around the rail station, which would significantly improve connectivity of the town to the region, but also issues of disconnect and severance, particularly around with High Street and the scale of traffic on that. So again, that's an important aspect for us. Jobs and skills and education, again, a key aspect of what we're looking to do, and that forms the platform for the, amongst other things, the skills hub. There is an issue, as we all know, around health and well-being, and there is clearly the leisure centre and related green infrastructure opportunities respond to that. We then kind of run through the evidence of need that we've put together, which I think you've had sight of previously in terms of the baseline material that we've put together. So a lot of this will be familiar to you, so I don't propose to go through that again at this point unless people want to. But clearly, it's a challenging property market. There are issues around traffic management and road safety, and as I've said before, severance. So that's what we refer to in terms of connectivity. We've also referenced obviously the digital connectivity, and whilst the infrastructure is there, one of the challenges is obviously businesses making use of that and accessing that connectivity. There is an issue, as we touched on, obviously around low wages and low value added jobs that we need to consider how we can address. keep moving through. Obviously, lots of data have been put together on the kind of socio-economic challenge, which I think has been well demonstrated in Claycross. And again, opportunities to improve health and address quality of life issues. Keep flying through this because it's all context which you'll be very familiar with. If we stop there just for a second, as Carl's mentioned, one of the key things that the Towns Fund are keen to see is that this is the strategy is set in its place. It reflects the character of Claycross, and that's an important aspect for them. And this feeds into how we should and could present the town's assets and strengths, the distinctive character of the town. So as it stands, we are identifying heritage and landscape, and we shouldn't underestimate the kind of resonance of the George Stevenson's connection, because ultimately part of this is about kind of presentation and piquing people's interest. And reference to those kind of issues certainly does that. We will talk about strong manufacturing base, the fact that there is it's a relatively kind of vibrant small business community, although obviously needs support. There is a strong community. We've talked about accessibility. We need to develop our kind of view of digital connectivity and how that's, whilst again in place, needs to be better accessed by businesses. In terms of the key opportunities that we're identifying, I think we have we've got a later version, but we are identifying that we're working on at the moment. But I think the key opportunities are, I suppose, mirror images of some of the challenges. There is an opportunity to kind of bring about a radical improvement of the town centre. There is significant public ownership within the town centre. Whilst some areas are in private ownership, there aren't a huge amount of private sector ownerships in the key parts that we are looking at. So there is a real opportunity there to make some significant change. There's clearly an opportunity to build on the heritage of the town. There's an opportunity around the relatively compact nature of the town. So there is an opportunity to ensure that all facilities are within ready walking and cycling distance of the community. We have the key assets of Charlie Park and Kenning Park, as we talked about before. Again, that can come out in a strand of quality of life, of active movement, active travel, and so forth. There is as we touched on, a history to the town, and we need to major on that and underline the distinctive character of the town. And it would seem to be kind of an emerging opportunity around arts and creative making. So some of those elements will need to come through strongly in the Towns Fund bit. Right, if we click on to the next section. So again, a lot of this will be familiar to you, so I don't propose to go through it in detail. So we have the vision, we have the key strands to that vision. We need to do some obviously further work on defining our outcomes, and this may well be a topic for discussion. Effectively, what are we aiming to do? What are going to be our benchmark returns on this investment? In terms of objectives, the strategy, as you'll be familiar with, hopefully kind of aligns around a series of themes and objectives. So it town centre regeneration is a key part of that, and that is in part, as we talked about before, kind of focusing a lot of the investment activity, new development in and around the town centre, and then connecting the rest of the town and the key assets into that, so that we're creating a focal point to the town, that we're creating that sense of activity and civic pride. And then obviously flowing on to that, we go into things like connectivity, which is important. We need to ensure that the community has access to the opportunities both within the town and elsewhere. Skills and enterprise is important. We need to raise skills levels, educational attainment and aspiration. So that is a very important kind of central aspect to what we're doing. Health and well-being kind of underpins the whole strategy, and it's important that we tie the likes of the Shelly Park Leisure Centre, the green infrastructure, the active travel elements of this into kind of wider strategy. And clean growth is an important aspect of that, and that for us is the potential approach around district heating pilot and low carbon energy strategy, and as Carl will probably mention shortly, the town hub see that as potentially quite very important in terms of the presentation of our bid as a unique or a fairly unique aspect of towns front bids as far as they've seen to date. The next bit is around strategic alignment. So this is all about, and we can skip through this fairly quickly, it's saying that all this strategy kind of is really embedded and reflects national, regional, local policy, and it does. It's very strong in that respect. So there's a clear line between national policy, regional policy, and what we are endeavouring to do. We talk then about the spatial strategy, which again will be familiar to you. Concentration on regeneration in the town centre and then connecting key assets and communities into that. So that's been a fairly consistent part of this is all the way through. And you'll be familiar with the buttress diagram that encapsulates the vision and strategy. These are, again, it's important, and we've probably got a little bit of work to do on this, but it's important from the town's hub point of view that we have a clear COVID recovery strategy that is reflected in this approach, and obviously that is a significant element of that is the regeneration of the town centre and the creation of people-friendly pedestrian environments and so forth. There's also obviously the green recovery and the net zero carbon agenda, which is very important, and as we touched on before, promoting aspiration and promoting growth. So then we have to go through a process of outlining how we have arrived at the projects that we have identified. And as you recall,
Peter,
yep, sorry,
Stanley from Sport England. Just going back to your contribution to local and national strategic priority. What you're missing there is the North East Derbyshire built facilities and physical activity strategies within that.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Well, if you drop me a line on that, we'll just drop it in the chat box.
Will do.
Yeah, and obviously, there's a wealth of policy and strategy. So apologies if we missed anything, but yeah, please feel free to add any in there. So we, as you recall, we've been through a process of identifying how these projects fit within our strategy, and we have, through discussion and reference to the following principles, we've developed the framework in terms of identifying the priorities, and that's we continue to have that discussion as we get towards the kind of sharp end of the bidding process. If we then click on, we then have to present what's called the logic model, which is essentially kind of the relationship between context and issues with projects and outcomes. The outcomes then obviously are intended to address the issues. So hopefully what we ultimately have there is a virtuous circle. So it's taking us from the issues to what our responses to what the outcomes will be. Click on. So then we go through the projects as they stand. And as I said before, this is essentially a kind of summary of tip 2 that we need to develop, and maybe we kind of leave this and perhaps come back to a discussion on that if we have time, if that's appropriate. But again, these projects you will be very familiar with. They've consistently run through the strategy. What we are aiming to do is, I think we have done at this point, is kind of identify a tip ask of £25 million, because that's the kind of the order of monies that we feel that we can justify. There is upwards up to 50 million available, but the advice is that is for kind of nationally unique projects. Not that we don't necessarily have those at the moment, but I think we're probably thinking that the 25 million, particularly given that a couple of the key projects such as district heating and the energy network and the rails ticket costs against them, we can only really present those as feasibility studies at this stage.
Peter, Lee Higgins got a question he wants to raise.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Chair. Sorry to interrupt, Peter. Just a couple of questions, really, comments as well, if I could, at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
On the page 100, I think North East Derbyshire Council Plan needs to be added, as well as, but that's just a minor point. I'll put all these in writing to you. I just wonder whether we're making enough about what we know already in terms of the economic impact that physical activity, sport and healthy communities help to generate. So there's plenty of information out there, and don't want to put Andy on the spot, but I know there's a Sport England document that suggests £3.91 for every pound spent in a community is generated back in terms of economic benefit. But I suppose it's a question. I'm not sure we're going to get an answer today, but the group will probably know that we've been working in the background on our strategic delivery plan for facilities, which is what Andy James has just mentioned there. And I just wonder, at what point do the board decide on some of the detail? Because I know we mention Charlie Park quite often, but there's a distinct difference between a replacement leisure facility and an iconic community hub, which is the work that we were working on. And I think at some point we need to determine what the direction is. And I understand, there's many things to try and satisfy through this process and trying to strike a balance across the town. But there's a real difference in deliverability of those two if we don't nail what we want down at this stage, not least in terms of cost. So I'm just wondering when we decide whether we're going for a community hub style facility that has been worked upon in the background for 18 months, or we're going for a replacement leisure centre as part of this bid. That's all. Thanks.
Sorry, Chair. Before the board answers that question, I just want to go back to Lee's first point. Part of the town hub response, when I was going to come on to later, was around some of the policy sort of support and evidence. And if Lee or Andy from Sport England, if you could send us that information, that can be part of the evidence base that we're not lacking, but what they said was it would be strong if we could point to more sources of evidence base. So, Lee or Andy, if either of you could send that to me, that'd be really helpful. And sorry, Chair, if the board wants to discuss the leisure centre.
Yeah, so it'd be good to hear comments from the group.
I think it's Andy from Sporting, and I think Lee's right. I think he's been a bit liberal with his estimation of 18 months. We've been working on the Charlie Park development and the wider environments for probably 3 or 4 years now. Certainly in terms of possibilities for accessing Sport England funding, we wouldn't want it to be just a leisure centre. What our funding really buys is that community-focused community hub model. So whereby you would have a leisure centre building alongside that, or co-located, is other services, and that's certainly what we've been working on. We have got strategic outcome planning guidance document that's, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Lee, very near completion. So Carl, that's got lots and lots of evidence for you in terms of some of the things that you were talking about. So I think it's up to Lee whether he wants to send you a draft of that. But that's certainly what we've been working on most recently to provide that evidence base. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I think you've got, I'm not sure if you're able to see, but in the chat bar, you've got Councillor Jeremy Kenyon and myself who are wanting to come in.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so I go
Jeremy,
first?
are you next?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really good document. I'd pick up on what Lee just said about the leisure centre. £6 million and a vanilla leisure centre is not really what we had in mind, and I think it probably needs to be bigger and have a larger sum allocated to it as a community facility. Just very minor one first on the detail. In 4.4.4, you've got probably the only typo in the document. It says it can fall meeting the needs of the community. And it'd be good to have the total ask put in there. I think it's just over 24 million at the moment, isn't it? But the main thing is going back to something Carl asked at the beginning about, does it describe Clay Cross? I think it's missing a couple of things. First thing is, it's a key town for a lot more than just the 8,000 residents that the tip seems to be about. And you could have a town of 8,000 with nobody nearby, and that's a very different thing for someone evaluating the bid compared to the Clay Cross situation, which is, it's the town for, I don't know, 20,000 or so people. And I think that needs to be really brought out in the background information, maybe with a map showing how close the nearby population clusters are. So that'd be one thing. And the other thing in terms of the context is it's very polite, shall we say, and very positive. And the negative information is in there in tables, and it's dry. And also the vision's a bit sort of motherhood and honey sort of thing. It's got all good things. And I think that it could be a bit more direct. For example, you could summarize the vision as make Clay Cross a place everyone wants to visit, move to and stay. There's a sort of more pithy summary of the vision, not to replace the vision, but just to tag it. And then the other thing I'd say is we should make more of in the background and the jobs and skills that the lack of desirability of Clay Cross is a big influence on young and working age people and leads to them moving away for better life opportunities. And that creates a bit of a negative cycle, and that locks Clay Cross into staying behind the national averages. I think those points, well, I don't know what other people think, but for me, those are the things that should be added into the context areas.
Peter, did you want to respond to those points?
Yeah, contributions welcome. I think it's a valid point around the wider context and the fact that Clay Cross has a wider role. And regeneration of Clay Cross would have significant benefits. Yeah, again, skills and aspiration is an important part of this, and we need to make sure that comes out. Around the vision, I suppose we have consulted on the vision, and people have signed up to that. But I suspect what we could do is kind of saying, well, that's the vision, but, you know, this is what it means, picking up on your point. You know, in simple terms, it means this. So we can add that in. The other challenge that I should mention is that there's, believe it or not, there's word limits on everything. So we're only allowed, I think it's 10,000 words, and we're at that already. So if we put something in, we take something out. But we can make use of appendices and so forth, and maps, as has been mentioned. I think the thing on funding and monies attributed, it's just useful to bear in mind, and you're probably aware of this, but the funding that we put that against those is the ask from TIP. It's not the total cost of any given project necessarily. And that certainly would apply in our minds in terms of the leisure centre. So we would currently seeing that as obviously Lee and others are leading on that, but we see the cost of that being more than that. So the other discussion that we're going to have is about co-funding and other sources of funding for these projects.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And we have a question from Councillor Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose I would echo some of the comments already made by Lee Hickin and Jeremy. I think I agree with most of those. I suppose there's a couple of points from me. First one is that I've had a few conversations together with Lee Rowley, with residents in Claycross area, and quite a few of them have talked about, and which is referenced in the plan, which is a good thing, talked about a lot of the kind of walking, cycling infrastructure within the community to connect the different parts of the town, but also to connect the town to the fantastic countryside that's around it. And I got the sense from the document that there's a lot of references to that, but it doesn't, and forgive me if I'm missing it, but it doesn't feel like there's any sort of specific sort of references to projects that we would like to pursue with regard to that. So it's there in the plan, but it's not really kind of concrete and pointing at a sense of, you know, this project here would link these two pathways, or you know, and actually link out into the countryside and do all of that sort of side of it. So that's kind of one point. And then the other point is a bit around what Peter said in terms of how sort of ambitious we should be. I appreciate, obviously, we're sort of held back a bit to an extent by the fact that we aren't able to, in terms of the two sort of most innovative aspects of this, with the district heating and the rail station, we're kind of held back by the fact that these projects are at a very early stage, and therefore, you know, feasibility is all we're really looking at. I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about how ambitious we can be and what the sort of criteria is in terms of what government are saying on that, because I'm sort of aware that we could have up to 50 million for grabs, but you're sort of suggesting that that's only going to be kind of one or two or a small number of town deals that are able to achieve that. And I just wondered if you could talk to us a bit more about what the kind of what you really need to show in order to have that sort of a bid, because I think from my perspective, I'd like us to be as ambitious as we possibly can, and I wonder whether, are we throwing away a chance by not, you know, are we losing anything by being a bit more bold and ambitious, even if we don't get that sort of level of funding, or are we better being a bit more cautious in what we approach government for, because they might view it dimly if we're over egging ourselves, if you see what I mean. So that's sort of a question, really, I suppose. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've got a question from Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to say for starters, it's a really good start to the 10. I think we've picked up all the key points that I think that all of us individually interested in and collectively. And I suppose really, I'm agreeing a little bit with the Councillor Dale. There's I think sometimes a bit of a lack of a bit more specific detail. So I'm interested a little bit more about the upskilling, how we're going to do that. I think if we had a little bit more specifics to try and demonstrate that we're with that little bit maybe further forward. And I know it's got time constraints, but the demonstrated project skills, health and well-being. I can understand the health and well-being from leisure, but not from a wider health perspective. I just wonder, looking at all the other ones that have gone in, and what do you think our uniqueness is? Is there something that can bring us together as a uniqueness that makes it look different from every other bid out there that will be asking for the same things? What's pulling it together? Is it one unique differentiation for Clay Cross?
I think maybe it's worth going back to Peter to answer a couple of those questions. So firstly to the 50 million, then the green area link, and then obviously the unique USP upskilling.
Yeah, the 50 million is a valid question. I haven't got the terminology in front of me, but I think it's it's something along the lines of nationally outstanding or nationally unique, groundbreaking. So it has to be something that is particularly special. I think we also have to bear in mind that we are in town investment fund context. It's a relatively small community. It's a relatively small town. The towns such as I think Blackpool, for example, and Worcester, they're in this process. Which are sizable communities. So that the 50 million would also come obviously with outputs and a commensurate increase in outputs. And as it stands, that it's a useful challenge, and we'll think about that again, and we'll have that conversation with the town's hub. But I wouldn't underestimate. Well, you've made the point, valid point, that there's two very ambitious projects in there that are in at relatively small ticket costs at the moment. The railway station and the district heating project are very ambitious projects in themselves, which will require significant amounts of funding that go beyond this strategy. So overall, the strategy is is getting on for 50 million, I would have thought.
Perhaps Tom could come in to assist on this answer as well, Peter. I think sure. A comment from Tom there.
Sorry, just finding my own mute button. No, I was just coming in basically on that. So the 50 million, like we've been guided, is few and far between. I think is the guidance from government that we're getting, and the initial impression that we're getting from them is that, like Peter said, it's going to be exceptional circumstances and where there's real sort of game changers. So I would focus on a good sort of £25 million bid if you can, or leading up towards that. I mean, following on, and Peter's got to a few of the points before me, but what you have to take into account when you're bidding for this funding is that you've got to go with the benefit cost ratio against all of these projects and value for money scoring. So to bid for £50 million and score highly on the benefit cost ratio, you're going to have to really go some weight in terms of the outputs that they'll deliver. And then the other piece for me really is finding match funding that can complement that, and co-funding for these projects. So if you're going to put £50 million worth of bids in, you're going to have to find some serious weight from private sector investors and other public sector investors to make sure that you have sort of that tangible match funding to put against these projects. So I think they will be really a couple and not very many nationwide.
Sorry, Chair, if I can. Melanie's put a comment in the comment box that I'll read out just because for the benefit of the recording.
Sorry, do you want me to, Carl? I'm quite happy to sort of say it.
Yeah,
and just,
sorry, thanks.
Yeah, just want to articulate what Tom said. Is he beat me to it? But yes, the tips of over 25 million. So whether that's just over 25 million or up to 50 million will be the exception. And we'll need to demonstrate that regional and national significance. But also, just I think important for you to sort of remember in terms of your ambitions around the rail station is the importance of the timescale for delivery, and the likelihood of that actually coming to fruition within the time frame of Towns Fund is highly unlikely, isn't it? So looking at it in terms of feasibility and where you may get to in the future is probably the best course of action for the train station particularly.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if you can go back to Peter now for the question on the green areas.
Yeah,
Well, I think that point kind of applies to a number of projects. Really, is what we're doing here is establishing the headlines. You know, we haven't working out the detail and developing the detail will be for the business planning phase, which will kick off, you know, in the autumn. So whilst we've got, you know, an idea of the opportunities and the issues to be addressed, what needs to be done as a next stage, or, you know, some of that work can be developed now, but that's subject to kind of a board decision. But as it stands, what we need to do is just kind of identify the headline opportunities and ascribe kind of broad order costs or budgets to those, and then it'll be, in terms of developing further detail for the green infrastructure, the skills hub, and so forth, it'll be a case of developing the business plan. In terms of uniqueness, I think there's two elements to my mind that we can present as unique, and perhaps they're related. I think it comes back to the kind of relatively compact and defined nature of Claycross, and the fact that we are looking at what the town hub have already identified as a unique kind of energy strategy. So I think it's around about, you know, genuinely trying to take Claycross on a journey towards, you know, zero carbon and all the, you know, benefits of that in terms of sustainability and so forth, and potentially what we could also be looking at, and we've made contact with the Midlands Energy Hub around this, is zero carbon benchmarking. So I think the uniqueness is that you can, through this work and other work in terms of the town centre, the skills, the energy, accessibility, and so forth, you can actually present Claycross as a opportunity to show how sustainable growth and development can actually happen, and that you can be, you know, a demonstrator for smaller towns across the country as to how this could work. So I think in some ways that's the kind of what I would suggest is kind of the unique thread to this potentially.
Okay, now if we can move on to the upskilling topic. I think, Richard, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, hi, Richard Morgan from Chesterfield College. I've not met everyone on the call, I don't think. Yeah, it's just looking at the skills hub and £3 million to do that. I'm just not clear what that's going to do. And just to give some context, if we were bidding as a college separately for £3 million, we'd be probably looking at about 1,000 job outcomes to justify our bid. And then how we leverage other funding, which I'm sure will, sort of adult education funding for upskilling unemployed and underemployed people, and apprenticeship funding to get people into jobs and help them move on with their career. And it just seems a bit thin, the justification there. There aren't really any job outcomes. We're talking about having it as a hub for Worcester Bosch, which is great to have an industry partner and sponsor, but what jobs are going to come out of it from them being there? You know, what's their plan to create and sustain jobs in the local community? And again, what do you need from us as an organisation and other providers to match funding with for us to commit funding to this from other funding pots we've got? I'm just not clear what we're doing with that £3 million, what the outcomes are going to be, and what part us and other providers need to play in that.
Peter, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, well, I suppose that, again, similar point applies really. You know, we've hopefully, you know, we've come a long way since June in terms of, you know, the overall shape of the bid, and, you know, there's certainly been lots of discussions around skills and the skills hub and so forth. We can only do so much within the kind of time available to kind of develop the detail of any or all of these projects. There's clearly further discussions to be had, and we'll be having them with Richard and others around kind of outline commitments and outline costs and so forth. But fundamentally, what we're doing at this point is identifying the kind of headline opportunities and headline projects, and there will be inevitably a lot of work that needs to be done through the business planning phase to kind of tie that down. So in terms of costs, we're on that project in particular, I believe we're kind of referencing back to the one public estate material, because bear in mind this is predominantly a kind of capital cost funding request. So again, there's a whole lot of work to be done alongside the kind of revenue side of things. But in the meantime, if we, if Richard and others have information that we can draw on, and we will be having a further meeting of the skills training group anyway to kind of go through that detail on tip 2, then please send it through. But in the meantime, we'll wait to have that meeting and talk this through in detail.
Obviously, Peter, we've got employers like Worcester Bosch, where I'm currently working. We're looking at a change in market segment in the coming years, really, as the oil market declines. We'll have to move towards newer technologies, which will need upskilling for some of the local people as well. So long term, it could have an influence in the local businesses. So something that Clay Cross for Worcester Bosch would be very interested in.
Mm.
Okay, then if we move on to Andrew King, I think you had a question.
Yes, yeah, this was really a comment on the page 94, 2.4, the town's assets and strengths. And I thought we could really make more of the strategic location of Clay Cross, which, I mean, I think we do acknowledge that we're on the A61 corridor. We're obviously very close to the M1 corridor. We've got 2 main railway lines that go through the town. And I think, I believe in terms of geographical location in the country, we are more or less about at the centre. And I think that we can make more of this. And I think, it does, in a way, this sort of follows on from Councillor Kenyon's point, which is saying, yes, the document identifies that we're a small one-horse town, if you like, less than 10,000 people. But as Councillor Kenyon says, we are serving a vast number of large settlements, which see Clay Cross as the place for them to come to be serviced and buy goods and transact business. And there must be a good 20,000 people in the North Wingfield, Wingerworth, Stretton, Ashover and other surrounding districts. But also this strategic location, if we could draw attention to how we fit into the country on a national basis, I think that might resonate well with the persons who are going to appraise this submission. So that's my observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any feedback on that, Peter? No, I'll take that as a no for now. Okay, I think Andy, you had your hand up earlier. Is that correct? Not sure if I've missed you out.
Just let me unmute myself. I'm still getting used to that after all this time working at home. Yeah, it was just the councillor earlier on mentioned about connectivity between sites, connectivity in terms of green networks, and that's something I've mentioned quite a couple of times at these meetings. Sport England have a document called Active Design. Carl, I'm just sending you a link to that. I don't know whether you want to circulate it around the board.
Yeah, well, thank you.
For them to have a look at, but it addresses all the things that the councillor was talking about earlier on about, connecting your schools, your colleges, your places of work. So you're looking at skills, creativity. How would you connect those places? So not just in terms of looking at a focus for physical activity, but also looking at a community element. Also, DCLG are quite keen on using that, so it might be worth, Carl, somewhere in your document, just putting a flag to that you'll follow where you can the principles of that. Might give us a bit more of a USP, as Councillor Renwick was talking about. Okay, that's it for me. Hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. See comments from Councillor Kenyon. Do you want to read that out just so it's noted on the live stream as well?
Okay, yes, I was just making the point that for the energy, clean energy, the past for Claycross was obviously a lot of coal was involved, very dirty energy, and the energy from coal mines, which is being explored at the moment, is it completes sort of the reformation of that past into a clean green future, and it's also a very practical thing. So making more of that, I think, would be a good thing.
Okay, I can see thumbs up across the room, so I think that's a good positive comment. Apologies, Warren, I think we moved on a little bit too quickly for you earlier. Would you like to comment on the market upscaling?
I put it in the chat, but it's just ensuring really that we understand there's a market failure locally and ensure that the hub is complementary to the local provision and doesn't just displace some numbers. So I think, you know, testing that a bit better would be good.
Okay, thank you. That's good info for Peter there. Do we have more questions? Have I missed anyone? It's been a little bit hectic trying to keep up here.
It's Lee Rowley, if I may, Chair.
Yes, of course, Lee.
I think the document is really good as a starter, as Carolyn, as Councillor Rennick said. Thank you very much for all the hard work that's been put into it. I think it's a much better position than it was a few months ago, so thank you. A couple of points from me. One, I think I'd align with the point that there's probably a coherence to it, which we need to think about in the next few weeks. How do we bring everything together into a single thread so that there's a sort of story that can be told and things can be hung off it? I'm not a marketeer, but it would seem that we need a more of a coherence to it, whether it's around transport or energy or even George Stephenson. You know, we could be in the market for saying we want to create a square in the centre that's named after George Stephenson or whatever, but I think there's a coherence point which we need to have a think about. I'd really value the opportunity just to go through this in a bit more detail for when the Minister asks me some stuff coming up. So I'd be grateful for a briefing, particularly on the numbers and things, some of the points that have been raised. So I'll organise that separately. And just so I'm clear from a governance perspective, this is just a discussion for comment rather than a request for decision at this stage. Is that right? So I'm clear about the governance around this document.
Yeah, at this point, it's just we're discussing the draft tip just to see, is it going in the right direction? Are you comfortable with what's been suggested? The figures, as we said, need to be looked at, because at the minute they are kind of ballpark figures, making sure they add up to 25 million. We've got a meeting with Tom in the diary for next Friday. Well, we'll have a meeting with Tom in the diary for next Friday to just discuss those, make sure they're tightened up and more accurate, and obviously we'll take on board what's been discussed today. So at this point, it's kind of a noting, are you comfortable with the direction of travel for the draft tip? Has it picked up on the key themes? Has it suitably identified Claycross as an area? We recognise that there's the golden thread that needs to go through all the projects, and we're thinking, based on the check and challenge, it's probably going to be around energy, because that is quite important. And although some of the stuff is going to happen beyond the life of the tip, everything that we do now needs to make sure that it's working towards that sort of low carbon area for Claycross, because we feel, based on the feedback, is that is our USP for Claycross.
And comment from my side as well, Lee. Carl's going to give a little bit of an overview of the next steps. So with regards to the timeline and when we have to finalise this tip for submission as well. So maybe that'll make it a little bit clearer for you as well. That helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any more questions? Have I missed anybody who's asked to speak at the moment? If not, maybe, Carl, do we need to have a couple of days where people can put any questions to you in writing, which we can discuss later?
Yeah, I think
obviously it's a very large document.
So, Chair, yeah, I think that'd be quite useful. So should we say all questions back by next Friday? I mean, that gives people a week to think about it. If they feel that's too long, then let me know. But if we have all questions by Friday, then we can sort of hopefully respond to them appropriately and make sure it's sort of reflected in the tip as it goes forward.
Yes, so maybe if you can put questions in writing to Carl direct, and he can make sure the right people get the questions. Okay, thank you. Then if we can move on to the next point on the agenda, outcomes of the Town Hub check and challenge session. So again, straight back to you, Carl.
Thank you, Chair. So we had the session on Monday or Tuesday this week. Can't exactly remember which. And overall, it was a very positive meeting. Actually, they were happy with a lot of the town investment plan. There was obviously some things that we need to start thinking about and how we do it slightly differently. Part of it is Mel, who's obviously here at the minute, has got to read it and mark it and understand it. So we need to make it as easy for Mel as possible. And as Peter's already said, we're at the word nearly at the word limit for 10,000 words. So we need to start thinking about whether we need to present it in a slightly different way, maybe some more graphics, some more maps, because I think, you know, a picture paints 1,000 words, as the saying goes. And then there's also some other bits that we've kind of discussed as we've gone through the work. Actually, Peter sort of mentioned it. So yeah, very much needs to be that golden thread. We've identified energy as we think is something that sort of fits in quite well, and it fits in with the board's aspirations for that long term, and the government aspirations as well in terms of low carbon. So we're going to look at that in a bit more detail. There's also some areas where if we've demonstrated it, but the evidence base could be a bit clearer, I suppose. So we're going to start pulling on some of the other evidence base to sort of triangulate in terms of, well, we've said this and it's sort of shown here and here, as well as just in one area. Also the COVID-19, so we have discussed it, but we haven't really put it into a sufficient detail. I suppose, you know, it's a global pandemic. So we need to sort of say, how is this tip going to support the recovery of Clay Cross? There's been a recovery plan for North East Derbyshire and also for the County Council. So that's something that we can sort of reference and make sure is included within there. And making better use of appendices was something that they sort of raised with us as well. So some of the drier and harder to read stats and the like could go into the appendices and then be referenced that way. And then that gives us obviously more word count, and we can improve the presentation really, I suppose. So overall, it was a very positive meeting. Peter, Mel, I don't know if there's anything that I've missed that you think needs adding. Peter's nodding, so that's a no.
Oh, I would just like to flag the fact that the Town Delivery Partnership was actually very, very impressed with the level of consultation that you've done, and actually that you need to just draw that out a little more within the tip. So actually sort of blow your own trumpet on that, really.
So there we go. I'm even underselling our own consultation, even on the feedback. So yeah, that's a very good point actually. The consultation, and then it's also making sure that consultation continues as we move through into the next phase of the tip, and hopefully when we get the 25 million from government and start to deliver that, we need to make sure that that excellent consultation work continues. So yeah, that's the feedback from the check and challenge session.
Okay, thank you very much. And if we move straight on to the next point, which is the brief overview of current status, next steps. So again, straight back to you, Carl, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. So as we know, the tip is due to be submitted. Originally it was the 31st, but that's a Saturday. So it's going to be the 30th of October is the submission date for our tip. We've got another board meeting on the 9th of October. At that point, hopefully we'll be in a position to discuss the final tip in more detail. It might be that we need to convene another meeting after that, but before the 30th, obviously, to just make sure we've absolutely finalised the tip and where we are. So I don't know if everybody's seen the papers. There's a diagram that I've lifted from the Town Hub work. So at this point, you submit your town investment plan. Obviously, we'll do that on the 30th of October. And then the MHCLG or CLGU review your plan and offer your heads of terms agreement accordingly. Work across departments to assess your town investment plan against criteria. Obviously, we have to respond to any clarifications as required. Review the in-principle case for proposed projects, include deliverability and assurance. Again, any questions on that? And then heads of terms are proposed with a budget allocated, agreed projects, and support from development departments and any conditions that are linked to that. And then at that point, we'll have a board meeting to agree. Projects into business case development. So the board will most likely have to conduct another tender exercise for a suitably qualified consultant to develop the work that Nexus have done already and turn that into from a team.
We seem to have lost him. I'll give him a minute to rejoin.
So did I disappear then?
Yep.
Right. I don't know how much of that you lost, but just talking about viability, alternative source of funding. And then, yeah, it's at that point, it moves into the detailed projects and business cases. There's ongoing support from the Towns Hub. We need to provide, all the things that are needed for a business case, and then delivering social value, and also environmental monitoring, impact analysis, the regen digital, all those sort of things that you'd expect us to have in the business plan. And then we submit those plans, those checked against the heads of terms and also the investment plan stage criteria, and confirm whether we've met all the conditions that have been set upon us. And then at that point, they agree the final projects, and then the funding is released. And at that point, we move into delivery phase, which will be the next part of after the business cases are agreed, is then actual delivery of the projects. Hopefully, some projects will be able to be delivered sooner than others, because obviously, Charlotte Park, a lot of the work and the discussions already been done. So we'll probably be in a position to press the button on that quite quickly, and then some of the other projects may take a bit longer within the plan to be delivered. So what we're going to need to do, I suppose, and what I'm going to suggest is I bring a paper to the next board meeting on the 9th of October, is regarding how we start looking at the next phase, and also thinking about that continues that engagement. So some of the things we've been suggesting is a shadow youth board, where we try to make sure that younger people within Claycross are engaged. So we'd have a shadow board that we could set up, and hopefully the chair of that board will be able to attend this one to discuss it from their perspective, obviously linking in with Chesterfield College, potentially the university if there's any sort of Claycross residents there who may want to be involved, or the local school as well, because we think that sort of running alongside this, that'd be quite a powerful tool for engagement with young people. And then we can start thinking about you as board members, whether how you can be more involved with some working groups, because some of this stuff is going to deliver some significant projects, and some of them are obviously directly related to your area of work. So it's how you can be involved in that. So I'll start to pull that together and bring that to the next meeting, just a rough outline of how we're going to see that happening. And then if the board agrees to that, we can obviously look to implement that at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments from the room to that feedback? Any questions to Carl? If not, then we can move on to point 8, record of interest. So I'm not sure if this Carl or Damien.
Yeah,
wanted to
sorry,
comment on this.
me again. You'd be sick of the sight of me. So we've had the audit from Mel and her team on the Claycross Board website. There's a few things that we need to do as a matter of urgency, and we've implemented those. One of them is the notes that you've agreed to today. We'll get them on the website. And that's just for the transparency's sake. And then there's other parts where we've met the minimum criteria, but best practice is to extend it a bit further. So you should have had an email from Annette chasing you up in terms of board profiles and if there's any records of interest that are outstanding. The records of interest, I think they're all about there anyway. It's just best practice that if we can say, I'm a member of the board and this is what I sort of see the vision for this. We've put a map of the area on the website and a few other bits that were quick wins really. But it's just as board members, if you could respond to the email from Annette. If you've not had an email from Annette, that means you've already done it. So thank you for that. But if you could respond to that as a matter of urgency, that'd be appreciated.
That's great. Thank you very much. And finally, any other business? Any questions from the board? Yes, Councillor Renwick.
No, just to wrapping up and to say thank you to all the work that Carl and Nexus has done behind the scenes, and to you, Gary. Still very excited about this, and I think, like I say, we've come a long way, and it'd be interesting now to see the next bits of detail to get this over the line. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's been a really good level of engagement in today's meeting. Everyone's clearly had a good look at the documents and digested that, so thank you. And again, just a reminder to forward any questions or comments to Carl directly by next Friday. And if you have no more questions or comments, I'd like to close the meeting and say I look forward to speaking to you all again in about 4 weeks' time. What was the date again, Carl? Was it Friday the
9th of October?
9th of October. Perfect. And thank you very much. Have a good weekend, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.